Emergency meeting from El Salvador. Bitcoin has turned negative year over year for the first time, even though we have new stimulus packages coming out of China. Sorry, I meant from Japan. We've also managed to stabilize a bit and are now heading back toward $96,000. We have bullish news. A lot of things are happening in the background, but no matter what, Bitcoin just keeps falling. Are we already in a bear market now? I've also got Finn here with me. We're going to take a look at what's happening in the market right now before we dive in completely. Give me a quick like down below. Higher Bitcoin prices, new all-time highs, and as a thank you, I'll show you this awesome sunset. So Finn, what's the mood like right now? We've now dropped to the $93,000 mark on a daily basis. Wait, I need to pull up the slides real quick. We can also see it here. Fear and greed index at 10, almost at panic level. Is all of this just an overreaction we're seeing, or do we really need to go into panic mode now?
Personally, I'm hoping this goes all the way down to 0 in the breeding. That would be much lower and you could buy in even cheaper. But I think it's all just overreaction. Honestly, the facts right now are actually really awesome. I've got this weird sand bath thing, or whatever that's supposed to be, and the Central Bank of the Czech Republic has basically bought Bitcoin as a test. I mean, it really can't get any crazier than this. Bitcoin was created to get rid of central banks, and now the first central banks are giving in. That's pretty awesome.
For example, if we take a look here, we can see that in the last 41 days, the entire crypto market, not just Bitcoin, has crashed by $1.1 trillion. That's 27 billion per day. We might also see that all the leverage traders, that is, all the leverage, just gets wiped out of the market. And maybe that's also a reason why we're pulling back.
It was like last August, October, that big flash crash, where in some markets we got completely wiped out. First, there was a big kind of flashy coin, and somehow it was completely leveraged 100 times with paper coins. And then, yeah, I think that's just the liquidation. But it could also go the other way. Now you've gone short. Do you have the data on how the shorts are doing?
Of course, it also depends on what levels you reach. I don't have it right at hand at the moment, but what I do have here, for example, is that we can also see the money supply has been rising the whole time. That means we're at peak money supply. Here, a record of $137 trillion. And now, even in Japan, new stimulus measures have been announced, which we can take a look at in a moment. That means the money supply is rising, and actually Bitcoin is supposed to be the inflation hedge against money printing, but still, the price is struggling so much.
So what do we do now at this point, Mark?
Well, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm definitely not panicking. But has something shifted? Is the money supply no longer the decisive factor?
No, I still think it is. It's just that it takes time. You can't know exactly when it'll happen, but the more money supply there is, the higher the Bitcoin price will go.
For example, we now have the $2,000 from Trump that have been announced, the dividend, basically helicopter money. He's just throwing helicopter money at people, basically laying it at their feet. Then we've got 20 trillion that Donald Trump wants to pump into the market next year. We've got, let's say, QT coming to an end at the Federal Reserve. We have potential QE coming up. That's certainly a nice prospect too. Yeah, but I just don't get why the Bitcoin price is so... Maybe there's another reason why it's struggling. Some people say, for example, that it's the whale sellers. That the whales, well, we can also say, if you want, that the whales are having a hard time because they've made so much profit now that they're taking profits.
I really think there are a whole lot of very, very wealthy people who are involved right from the takeoff and are still selling at 100,000. It's still this 100,000 mark. I think there's still a lot of supply that needs to be absorbed from the really, really early OGs who have a ton of Bitcoin. And once that's over, then things can move forward right away. But I also didn't think it would take this long. I actually thought it would be pretty quick. That's really fascinating. But yeah, how long has it actually been stuck at the 100,000 mark?
Yeah, because that's wild. Look, now we have the Trump administration. And now, let's say we have a pro-Bitcoin government. Everyone said, okay, if Donald Trump comes to power, then blah, blah, blah. And now, I think we're either at the same level as when Donald Trump was elected, or we've even dropped a bit. That means all those expectations are still just out of the market. And actually, at some point, we'll be rewarded again as hodlers. And that reward is still missing. And then maybe people start to lose patience.
But I think that's exactly when Bitcoin will make a move again. And people didn't expect it. And then it starts moving again. Now we're seeing the same thing with Bitcoin. When people don't expect it to go up, that's when it goes up. And the same goes the other way around. Last time, everyone was super bullish, like I said. But maybe we were all too bullish. But I think now, if you look at Twitter, everyone is so bearish. Really, I am.
And that could be the opportunity. That this situation here could lead to rising prices again. We can also take a look at what important events are coming up this week. We have Fed data, and then we have the Fed minutes meeting. That's always very, very interesting. Basically, there are just some internal details about the interest rate decisions. Then we also have more data from the Philadelphia Fed. What else do we have here? Inflation data, expectations. There are a total of 14 Fed speakers this week. So that's already very, very interesting. For example, when the Federal Reserve gives speeches and how the market reacts to them. Some people also say, for example, that it's kind of annoying because Bitcoin is basically just watching what happens at the Fed. Bitcoin wouldn't really be independent at all because whatever the central bankers say, whether they say interest rates go up or down, the price reacts accordingly. Is that a problem?
No, not really. In short, when the Bitcoin price drops, we're happy, and when the Bitcoin price rises, we're happy too. So actually, it's not a problem. Those are just some external factors. In the long run, none of that really matters. I think in the long run, it's going to shoot up again in some countries. Some authoritarian state is just waiting to mess with Bitcoin, like the USA. I still say that the Bitcoin reserve is a high priority.
Okay, but the thing is, people feel like they're being played because anyone can just talk big. They actually have to execute at some point.
It doesn't matter if the US doesn't, someone else will. So the idea's on the table. Someone just has to actually execute, like you said. Smaller countries do it with metals. Kazakhstan's starting too. How many now have development and reserves? That's quite a few, right?
Yeah, it's mostly the smaller ones. Bhutan, El Salvador, Pakistan, Kazakhstan. I don't know if Kazakhstan already has a reserve, but they're smaller countries. And then there's places like the Czech Republic with a test portfolio, but you can't really count that. Yeah.
Or also the pension fund from Luxembourg.
Yeah, exactly. Sovereign wealth funds. It's also interesting that there are different forms. In some countries, the government buys. Sometimes it's a sovereign wealth fund, and sometimes it's a central bank. So there are basically different ways for liquidity to come in here. Or not really how liquidity comes in, but rather how they buy Bitcoin here.
I thought that test purchase by the central bank was pretty wild recently. With Claire, you only do a test purchase. Now, of course, they're not buying 30 billion. The government isn't always buying Bitcoin, but this testing thing, like with Christina Gartner, that's what's so cool about it. Christina Gartner says they announce it. We're looking into Bitcoin, and of course, the central bank is involved with Bitcoin. She read the Bitcoin standard, and she knows there's a difference between Bitcoin and crypto. And then Christina Gartner said, maybe we should take a look at what it would be like to have Bitcoin in the reserves. Let's see. Then Christina Gartner spoke up and said, no way, that's never gonna happen. And yet they still did it, just as a task. So, like I said, nothing's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. So in the next 2 or 3 years, they won't be building up a Bitcoin reserve at the central bank, but they will be evaluating it during that time. And if they do it, it'll just be with those fancy coins, ETFs, Bitcoin ETFs, not real important Bitcoin.
Okay, but that means this is basically a slap in the face for Christine Lagarde, because Christine Lagarde said, yeah, I don't consider Bitcoin liquid enough. It's somehow for criminals and all that. I can eat proper food, it's too volatile and all that, but that means they're just messing with us.
They're messing with us. Of course the central bank is messing with us.
Yeah, what I wanted to look at now, for example, there was this report here. Japan is now considering injecting 110 billion into the market, a new stimulus package, and the Japanese yen has also dropped to a 35-year low. That means the fiat currencies, if we look at the yen now, the dollar keeps losing value. So that already opens things up for Bitcoin. Not because the price of Bitcoin is going up, but simply because fiat money keeps depreciating against Bitcoin. That's why you really can't be bearish on Bitcoin at all.
In general, you can't be bearish on Bitcoin. I think anyone who somehow thinks they can time the market, there are some people who say, I saw it coming, I sold at the top. Or is that what you want to know? It could just as easily have gone up to 300,000. Then it could drop down to 50,000. But in the long run, it just keeps going up. You get mixed up. Did you
have a take on the cycles? Has the cycle been broken, or are we really in a bear market now? Because according to the 4-year cycle, we should actually be in a bear market right now.
I wouldn't even say about these cycles that they last until they just don't anymore. It's already happened 3 times. The 4th time, it's guaranteed not to happen. It's the guaranteed payout. I mean, I can't know for sure, but now that Wall Street is going crazy, this is the first time that the big money is really in it for you. I think they're not thinking so naively anymore. Now they have their own strategies, and of course, they have huge liquidity, very large volumes that they trade. So I don't think the 4-year cycles exist anymore.
Okay, but that also means that maybe people front-ran the cycle because this time we saw the all-time high earlier, maybe because everyone expected the all-time high to come, so everyone already bought in. And now everyone expected, okay, now comes the sell-off, so maybe everyone has already sold.
That could be. Selling's a shitcoin, honestly. Yeah.
You always say you shouldn't sell your Bitcoin. Maybe we can take a quick look at that in a moment. But we can also see here there are big players. For example here, Cardone Capital is buying another 888 Bitcoin, which is also interesting because that's a real estate company that usually, let's say, buys real estate. But now they've realized that Bitcoin is actually cooler than real estate. Of course, we still have some real estate, but we also have to buy a lot of Bitcoin. That's going to become more and more common. Companies are realizing, hey, not just our regular business, but on top of that, we also need to start accumulating Bitcoin.
It'll be interesting to see how many real estate companies are really starting to move into Bitcoin now. Same goes for MetaPack. There are even hotel companies now getting into Bitcoin. Actually, you too. So they're hiding out in the first wave. They already know how capital works, how collateral works, and then Bitcoin is the superior collateral. Of course, that probably means they understand Bitcoin faster, I would think. That's Leon Lonkham, the big real estate expert. Yeah.
He's actually been on the channel a few times already. Yeah, shout out to Leon. So just quickly, what's your take? Why shouldn't you sell your Bitcoin, and why might it be better to use Firefish to take out a loan against it and get a quarter there? Why would?
You want to sell your Bitcoin? That's the question. If you sell, your Bitcoin are gone. You get annoyed because the price keeps going up while someone else is eating your lunch. And on top of that, you have to pay taxes. Wouldn't it be nice then to just use your Bitcoin as collateral so you're basically shorting fiat and going long on Bitcoin? But what's really important is that you make sure your Bitcoin aren't just sitting with some random person. And above all, that you don't get liquidated. You have to make sure you have enough Bitcoin, do it very conservatively, and put up more Bitcoin as collateral than required. That's the most important thing to me, because that way you can keep rolling over the collateral, just like I do with all those fiat billionaires.
So basically, we end up with a bunch of little Michael Saylors, all launching a speculative attack on the euro.
Speculative attack on the euro. Michael Saylor is doing something different. He doesn't use secured loans. He gets even better loans because he basically gets unsecured loans for maybe 1% interest or something like that. Exactly. Just do what Michael Saylor does, or do a half Michael Saylor, just with fiat already. Okay, and
then I go to firefish.io, then I send Bitcoin. Basically, I send it to an address where I still have control over it myself. So Firefish has a key, I have a key, the counterparty has a key, and that way I've basically minimized the risk.
Something like that. So it's a 3-of-3 multi-sig, basically, to break it down. It's a predefined transaction. So the transaction can't be changed anymore. There are still 4 ways the Bitcoin can be spent. Basically only back to the borrower or to the perpetrator or normally to the lender. And Firefish can basically just press a button and send the Bitcoin to the right or left. Not to yourself. That's basically the whole point. So you can't do anything. You don't actually hold a key, so to speak. You theoretically have keys. You can check everything because it's open source, but in the end, you don't have to hold them yourself. Nothing new is defined there, then held.
Okay, so definitely no need to panic. Life goes on, even if we're currently in crisis mode here.
And the sun sets.
Bitcoin sold, but we can see it here. The sun still rises, the sun still sets. Life is still beautiful. So don't let it ruin your mood. And if you're exactly desperate, man, down in the cave, Bitcoin Hotel, there's still a discount. And if you still want to buy Bitcoin, check out 21 Bitcoin, check out Bitcoin Hotel. Up to 20% off fees when buying Bitcoin. Make sure to use Bitcoin Hotel. And we'll see each other, folks. Peace out. Ciao.